Hello, my name is Sean and I am the owner of the website mentioned below this video. In this video I want to tell you about my story and how my personal experience with prostatitis can help you. I am a former prostatitis sufferer, and now I work as hard as I can in helping other people who have this terrible disease. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about my prostatitis history and how I went on to finally be cured of this condition that had ruined my life. In my case, I was lucky that a culprit bacteria was discovered immediately. Unlucky that it was too entrenched to be able to be killed with any form of oral antibiotics. So this led to many years of repeated courses of antibiotics and very little help from the medical establishment until I got desperate enough to figure out a way to kill this infection. Some doctors tried really hard, some sadly didn't. For most, if they didn't get a positive result from a urine or an EPS test, the caring attitude went south very quickly. Without a positive result to a simplistic test, all interest in my case went out the window. I later learned that a negative test was quite normal once they deemed an infection as chronic. So here's what I went on to do. First, I had to keep taking Ciproxin to be able to help myself. But like others out there probably, I turned to the internet, worked through every piece of advice and self-help I could find that sounded at least somewhat reasonable and sensible. My biggest improvement, not the cure, but it came with what I ate and drank. And this was difficult because I was so often in pain and feeling a sense of hopelessness that I had turned to the worst things in an effort to feel happier, drinking alcohol and a lot of processed fried foods. Curtailing these two things made an enormous difference in improving my symptoms of bladder and of groin pain and urinary urgency. But I found that often the advice I tried to follow was complicated, and it pretty soon worked out that if I simply stuck to eating heaps of steamed green vegetables and small amounts of meats, but with no spices whatsoever, I could maintain the improvement. But if I even slipped with just a few beers, boy, did I know about it the next day. So to get to the next step, it was extremely obvious to me that oral antibiotics could only suppress the infection, and that made me feel helpless. A lot of prostatitis sufferers I've talked to felt even more helpless because they'd been diagnosed as having the non-bacterial prostatitis, which I soon learned meant only that no pathogenic cause could have been found. It didn't mean that they didn't have an infection, bacterial or fungal, but once an infection gets into the male genitourinary system, first it causes havoc, then it becomes chronic when it gnaws away at you, but it protects itself behind the calcifications and the dead tissue debris and becomes next to impossible to reach with oral medications. Several premier U.S. medical institutions are now reversing their stance about 90% of chronic prostatitis being non-bacterial, recognizing now how elusive pathogens can be regarding detection. So just because a bug, bacteria, etc. can't be found, it doesn't mean that you have non-bacterial prostatitis. And in the clinic I finally got cured at told me that every prostatitis case they've ever treated was caused by one or more of the pathogens. That is, of course, the infection. Anyway, by this time I'd learned the hard way that a cure was going to only come from me finding one, and no amount of consulting or of doctors was really going to help. I worked out that oral antibiotics were never going to cure anything, And by applying myself to the problem, it became obvious to me that the only way would be to inject antibiotics into the prostate and in the surrounding areas. This did not come to me as any sort of crazy idea. It came as like a eureka moment, as being the only way to fix the problem. After a really long time, I finally had something to aim for, and my internet searching now had some focus. I put in long hours studying the subject. I immediately found prostatitis treatment clinics that used direct injections. I found it frustrating that each treatment clinic didn't give the amount of information I wanted. I wanted to know everything, so I turned to forums for advice from people who had already sought treatment with direct injections for prostatitis. That didn't make things any easier, in fact more difficult. For every person that I found who recommended a clinic, there were tens of people who would demonize the same clinic. In fact, 95% of the forum comments on the internet eventually turned out to be unhelpful. I later learned that some prostatitis clinics they use trolls to post false information about competitors' clinics. So after a lot of work, I chose a direct injections prostatitis treatment clinic, and I made the big jump and I went for the treatment, which turned out to be successful and the best thing I'd ever done. I can emphatically say now that direct injections are the only way prostatitis can be resolved once deep-seated and chronic. Afterwards, as a result of all the research I'd done on prostatitis treatment clinics, I decided to start a website showing the information that I found out, a guide to the best prostatitis clinics. A lot of information came back from other patients while I was receiving these treatments, and many of them had already tried more than one clinic and were giving me first-hand information. My website, of course the link is below, has flourished and become very popular. I get emails every day thanking me for the information and asking for advice. So if you're at the stage of thinking you'll never get rid of this horrible disease, I can tell you I've been where you are, and I was there for far longer than I needed to be. And you don't have to be there any longer. Read everything you can on my website at the link below. If you need help, contact me via the contact link on the website. I'll do everything I can to help you out. Be sure of this one thing: you can beat chronic prostatitis.